Hi, it's good to welcome Abby to this edition of Life of Hope. Abby is a mental health nurse and is training in CBT counselling, and she's going to give us some insight into social anxiety today. Abby, could you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm 28. I'm a nurse by background. I started training to be a CBT therapist about September last year, and I'm really enjoying it and finding it's having a great impact on the patients that I'm working with. So, really happy to be here to talk a bit about social anxiety today.
Thanks, Abby. Could you tell us a bit about what social anxiety is, and is this something that people may struggle with, especially after the last year of COVID?
Yeah, definitely. So social anxiety, so it's classified as an actual anxiety disorder, and it's really the persistent excessive fear of being negatively judged by others, and fearing kind of being humiliated and embarrassed, and all sorts of situations can kind of bring up that anxiety. So it might be kind of doing a presentation, or even kind of just having a conversation with people can be really stressful for people. And social anxiety is actually one of the most common anxiety disorders, and it can have a real significant impact on people, and really affect their ability to form relationships and also to get jobs and things like that. So it's a really important thing to talk about. But yeah, with kind of lockdown as well, lots of people will be kind of struggling with kind of coming out of lockdown, particularly if they were socially anxious before, because lockdown has meant actually it's been quite a nice place where people can feel quite comfortable, and kind of coming out of that can be difficult. But also people that might not have struggled beforehand might find that actually going back into kind of meeting up with people is difficult and kind of causes some anxiety. So yeah, definitely a problem now.
Okay, and could you give us some tips? I mean, how can people with social anxiety be helped?
Yeah, so there are some things that we can do to actually kind of solve this problem. We don't really look at kind of how it started really. We want to kind of look at what's kind of keeping it going. And there's kind of four main areas that we talk about in CBT that can keep social anxiety going. So there's things that actually people do before social situations that can actually escalate their anxiety. So sometimes people actually end up kind of overthinking before social situations. So they might be thinking about all the different possible outcomes, how people will judge them. They might even start planning what to say or what to do. But all of these things actually increase anxiety. Another thing is what we call safety behaviours. So things that people do in the situation in order to reduce or prevent the feared thing from happening. So basically, if somebody was kind of concerned that others would see them as, boring or stupid, what they might do is kind of either sort of mentally rehearse what to say. They might drink alcohol or take drugs. They might also try to reduce the attention on themselves. So some people can find that they try to kind of avoid eye contact, or they speak really quickly or really quietly. They might try and hide their face, all those sorts of things. And actually, sometimes people can just avoid those situations altogether. So, you might be invited out to the pub with your friends, but instead you might make excuses not to go, or you might really leave really early. So, it all makes sense why people do these things, because they're anxious and they don't want the kind of bad thing to happen. But actually, they all kind of have unintended consequences. So, for example, if you do get really drunk or you get really high or something like that, then actually it's more likely that you might do something that others might perceive badly. If you're avoiding eye contact or leaving early or not engaging in conversations as much, it might be that other people might come across as quite rude, or that you're not interested in other people. It can also make people notice you more if you're kind of acting a bit kind of like you don't want to be part of the conversation or trying to cover up your face. It can also, these behaviours kind of stop you from being able to see whether, the feared outcome actually happens or not. And means actually sometimes people rely on those behaviours a bit too much. They also kind of increase our attention on ourselves and make us feel a bit more anxious. So all of those behaviours, even though they're intended to make us feel safe, they actually make us feel a bit worse. So that's another point. And then the third point is kind of focusing our attention on ourselves. So kind of being in your own heads during social situations. So lots of people talk about kind of feeling really self-conscious. And what actually happens is people kind of really, really focus in on themselves. So they start to think about, how am I feeling? How am I coming across to others? They start to monitor their own performance. And actually all of that stuff just really, really increases your anxiety. So if you're thinking about how anxious or uncomfortable you feel, then actually you're going to end up feeling more anxious and uncomfortable. If you're noticing that actually your cheeks are becoming quite hot and you feel like you're blushing, and actually because you feel anxious, it will make the blushing worse. And another thing about kind of focusing your attention on yourself is that you kind of miss what's going on and you kind of can't concentrate on follow the conversation. So actually it's kind of more likely that, the things that you say won't kind of be in context, and that actually you might kind of reinforce that belief that you've come across as stupid to other people. And the last one is kind of after situations. So socially anxious people tend to kind of afterwards think a lot about how they acted after a social situation. So they'll ruminate about how they performed or what other people thought about them. And most of the time, the more you do that, the worse actually you'll feel about how you did. So those are kind of the four main things that kind of happen when, people are struggling with social anxiety.
Thanks, Abby. I've got the 4 points here. Let me put them on the screen.
Okay, so these are the tips. Okay, so what you want to do is kind of focus on each one of those and kind of work on them. So really, you need to be banning the overthinking beforehand. So we would actually kind of say it's easier said than done, really, isn't it? Try not to think about those things, but actually, if the thoughts come into your mind, trying to think about something else and focus on the positive things about that social situation, about how nice it will be to see friends. The second one is to try to drop those safety behaviours. So instead of avoiding eye contact, try and make eye contact with people. Try and ask questions of people. Try and go against those things that feel like you really want to do, and then also stop avoidance. So actually kind of go to the pub with your friends. Try and kind of go against that. And then the third one, kind of shifting your attention. So trying to focus more on the conversation and what people are saying. So, kind of focusing on what you can see, what you can hear, what's kind of going on around you, and kind of trying to get out of your own head. And the last one is banning overthinking afterwards. So once again, afterwards, if those kind of thoughts come into your mind about, oh, how did I act? Did I act okay? Then actually kind of trying to push those away and distract your mind and think about something else. And all of these things are really difficult to do straight away, and they require lots and lots of practice. So it's your default position to go straight back to what you were doing before. So you need to keep trying and practicing those things. And of course, if you find that the problem is persisting, then definitely go and get some professional help and ask somebody for that support.
Thank you, Abby. It's really helpful. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
You're welcome.